Hello, and welcome back to yet another NFL video, man. Today's a very special day. I got the Falcons hat on because we are in a time right now that I thought I'd never see in my lifetime. The Falcons are good. Yeah, man, we got the Falcons team preview up today, and I'll be honest, I wasn't even going to upload this one. I had it made a while ago, but I wasn't even going to upload it until like a couple weeks. But if you are aware, the Falcons recently made a few moves that I just had to talk about the Falcons a little early now because they're a little more serious than previously thought. You know what I mean? So let's get right into this, man. But first of all, thank you for watching. Let's go, man. All right. So the Falcons, as we all know, have not been so amazing the last few years. I think they actually had three straight 7-win seasons. I think that even went into Dan Quinn's last year, maybe. And then you had Arthur Smith the last 2 years for sure. The end of the Matt Ryan era was not pretty. Their offensive line was terrible. Matt Ryan was old and ass. In the last 2 years, they've gone 0 for 2 on quarterbacks. They tried to get Marcus Mariota, who in hindsight actually wasn't all that terrible, but they didn't have enough weapons for him. And then last year they had Desmond Ritter, who just he sucks, he's terrible, led the league in turnovers, I think. And so yeah, and you can throw Taylor Heineke in there as well if you want, but they have not been able to find a quarterback. That is until this offseason when they went out and got Kirk Cousins, and then they went out and got Michael Penix. So they have now, they said, you know what? Better to have too many quarterbacks than not enough quarterbacks. And I can get behind that right there. Let's take a look at what they were good at last season. I'll be honest with you, it wasn't a lot. They were not good at too many things last year. Here's the thing that interests me. So offensively, we know Desmond Ritter at quarterback, they weren't too good. They ran the ball very effectively, and they've been able to run the ball actually. I think in 2022 they were like the best running team in football, or at least pretty close to it. And that was before they even had Bijan. So we know how good the Falcons are when it comes to running the football. I think they have a pretty good offensive line overall, but defensively here is what interests me. If you weren't aware, they have a new offensive court or sorry, head coach coming in from the Rams, Raheem Morris. And you look at the building blocks you have here for the Falcons defense, you weren't necessarily the worst at anything. They didn't get enough takeaways. That is absolutely the case. They did not get enough takeaways. They were bottom or close to bottom of the list when it comes to pressure on the quarterback, but they were really good against the pass, top 11 in total yards allowed. I see something here. I see the foundation for a pretty solid defense here for the Falcons. And offensively, you would hope, right? Because the new offensive coordinator coming in is the same one from the Rams last year. And if you kept up with the Rams, they had a pretty good offense last year. Puka got a lot of touches, Kyron Williams broke out. So I think that the Falcons offense and defense should be getting significantly better next season. Let's take a look here at the depth chart. And this is not including the recent additions. I'll talk about them a little later. Offensively, right? Kirk Cousins as the starter. We hope he comes in fully healthy. None of that injury concerns from last year raise their head. And he should just straight up be one of the better quarterbacks in football. He has been for a while. He's been consistently like a top 6 to 8 quarterback for 4 or 5 years in a row. But now that he's fully healthy again with a pretty good offense, I really like their offensive line. I mean, is there a team in the league with a better duo at running back? The only one that comes to mind right now is the Lions. I mean, Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. The problem for me is the wide receiver core. Now, listen, you got Kyle Pitts at tight end, which more than, helps. Kyle Pitts, Drake London, you would hope, right, if you're a Falcons fan, that just the two of those guys alone can combine for 2,300 yards, right? And they can take up the bulk of the passing offense, right? But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think Kyle Pitts will certainly be better than he was last year. I think Drake London should have the best year of his career, but outside of those guys, I mean, Darnell Mooney, you took a flyer on him, right? They gave him a good amount of money, actually, when even though the last 2 years with the Bears have not been all that impressive at all, you'd hope, obviously, that he can be a productive player for you. Rondale Moore, another one of their offseason additions. He went down with an injury. He should be out for the entire season, I believe. So now that leaves you with a really shallow wide receiver core. You got guys like Ray McLeod, Chris Blair, like a sixth round rookie, Casey Washington. It's not a great receiver core, right? You are really hoping here that Drake London, Kyle Pitts carry that room. And you need guys like Darnell Mooney to step up, and you need a lot of production. And I mean a lot of production out of your backfield between Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. You really need to get creative here with how you move the ball in this offense. But I think they absolutely should be one of the 12 best offenses in the NFL. And I think that's being pretty modest, actually. And then defensively here, this is where I had a few concerns because if you look at it right, you don't see too many star players here, right? On this deal, and that's just being, objective, right? I'm not trying to be mean or anything like that, but outside of Jesse Bates, I mean, where are the Pro Bowlers on this defense? You got Grady Jarrett, but he has not been good. Well, maybe he was a few years ago, but last year especially, Grady Jarrett was not all that impactful. Um, I like some of their linebackers. Arnold Ebiketie is a young guy who I think has a lot of potential. Caden Ellis had his biggest season recently. You bring in David Onyemata from the Saints, and you got AJ Terrell in the back end of the secondary who had an All Pro caliber season a few years ago, but has not been able to uh, recreate that same success. So obviously, I had some concerns with this defense. Let's take a closer look at the offense, though. Obviously, Kirk Cousins, he was actually leading the league in yards, if I'm not mistaken, before he got hurt. So it's a very real likelihood that Kirk Cousins would have won MVP last year had he not gone down with that injury. I'm almost certain he would have been in the running. He was having one of the best years of his career. So if you're a Falcons fan, you're very happy to hear that, and that hopefully he can just pick up right where he left off. And this is what I was talking about earlier with the production out of the backfield. So if you look at it here, right, Bijan and Algier combined for over 2,300 yards, close to 500 touches, and 13 touchdowns. Now, you'd like a lot more touchdowns, right? But they both also played 17 games. I can almost guarantee you that's not happening next year. For both of your running backs to play all 17 games, that is incredibly lucky on the Falcons. And now I know Bijan kind of missed that one game where he was like sick, but he was like, I don't know what that was, but if you're an optimist, right, as a Falcons fan, knowing the shortcomings they have at receiver, you would hope that Bijan and Algier can combine for at least 26 to 2,700 yards. That's not going to be easy, but it is possible, in my opinion. I think if you just obviously you want to get Bijan the ball out of the backfield as a receiver more often because he is more explosive, more shifty. And Algier is a guy who is able to run between the tackles more effectively, I think. So there is a way to use both these guys to to the best of their ability. Bijan, I think you got to get him over 300 touches, over 1,600 yards. Algier around 250 touches, over 1,000 yards. I think it's possible, especially when you have such as good an offensive line as the Falcons do. Now, Drake London, like I said, I expect him to break 1,000 yards for the first time in his career. I wasn't too high on him when they originally drafted him over guys like Jamison Williams. I didn't love the pick at first, but now I'm starting to see the vision. He's put together some really solid years with not that good quarterback play. So I do think Drake London is going to break 1,000 for the first time, and I think he actually could emerge as like one of the better young receivers in the NFL next year. Kyle Pitts, obviously, as a rookie, broke 1,000 yards, has not been able to accomplish that since. But the talent's there. I don't think anybody's questioning that. You would hope, right, that with Kirk Cousins, who's been able to get guys like TJ Hawkinson the ball in the past, you would hope that he would find that rhythm with Kyle Pitts. And like I said, London and Pitts combining for 1,500 yards and 5 touchdowns, that's not even close to enough. You got to be combining for well over 2,000, 2,100 yards if you're those two guys. And then Darnell Mooney, like I said, just not enough the last 2 years. The Bears, he needs to bounce back heavy, but you would assume that this is the type of offense that he could see a lot of success in as a deep threat. So keep an eye on Darnell Mooney. And defensively here, like I said, or sorry, offensive line. Let's get into it. This is why I am so confident in the Falcons' offensive line. You have a great run blocking offensive line, especially on the right side. Drew Dahlman, Chris Lindstrom, Caleb McGarry. Chris Lindstrom, by the way, like one of the best players just in the NFL. Like I think 2 years ago, he was the highest graded PFF player in the entire league, which is just crazy to think about. Shout out Chris Lindstrom, one of the best in the business. Matthew Bergeron was a rookie last season, so while those grades are not all too impressive for a rookie, you would expect him to take a jump year one to year two. I like both of their tackles. McGarry, a better run blocker. Jake Matthews, a better pass protector. I don't see a flaw really in this entire offensive line. And I think with guys like Bergeron being young, you could actually see some improvement next year along this line. So all these guys played at least 800 snaps, so fairly healthy as well. So it is looking pretty good, right, for the Falcons offense. The only thing holding them back is not enough depth at receiver. I would like to see them make a move, to be honest with you, give up a third or a fourth round pick to get in another guy at receiver who could give you some type of production. Moving on to the defense, couple guys I'd like to highlight here. Arnold Ebiketie had 6 sacks last year. And by the way, look at the amount of playing time. He only played 384 snaps and had 6 sacks, 12 QB hits. Ebiketie is a guy, man, where if they just give him the time, the light of day, I really think this guy could be a Pro Bowl level player. And now that he has a guy, a vet on the other end in Matthew Judon to take pressure away from him, I could really see an Arnold Ebiketie 10 sack season next year for the Falcons. I really do. The back end, obviously, you got all pro Jesse Bates, had like one of the best seasons of his career, might have led the league in picks, to be honest with you. He was absolutely incredible last year. AJ Terrell, not bad, not bad by any means, but it's not close to where he was a few years ago when he was in the all pro conversations. He still has some room to improve, certainly as a young player. Grady Jarrett, he only played 8 games. He has to turn the clock back a little bit if the Falcons D line wants to be where it needs to be. Anyamata should be a good addition from the Saints, like I mentioned earlier. Caden Ellis with a breakout year last year, over 11 TFLs, 4 sacks, 120 plus tackles. He is kind of the best linebacker that they have, stand up that is. And I was a little concerned with this secondary beforehand because they did have young guys like Clark Phillips, but I look at guys like Richie Grant, and I'm like, ugh, he is not too good on the back end. That is not a safety that I would want in coverage most of the time. He is not very good, which is why making these two additions right here, Matthew Judon and Justin Simmons, two of really the best in the game at what they do. Now, Judon last year was hurt, but if you look at the production, 4 sacks and 9 QB hits in 4 games, that's I mean, if you just multiply it by 4, that was damn near his best season last year. So obviously 2021, 2022, Judon played all 34 games combined for what is that? 28 sacks, 53 QB hits, 28 TFLs. The man was an absolute monster, one of the best in the league for 2 out of the last 3 years. And Justin Simmons has just straight up, I think he's made like 4 out of the last 5 all pro teams at safety. He had fucking 11 picks in 29 games between 2021 and 2022. And then last year was a down year for him, right? Of course, but it's still just, it's so impressive. And Justin Simmons now, this is the thing with the Falcons back in now where I had concerns previously. I don't know if we have a better safety duo in football than Justin Simmons and Jesse Bates. Honestly, both of these guys have been all pros recently, like in the last 2 years. And now they're playing on the same back end. Judon and Ebiketie coming off the edge. I really, really have a lot more confidence now in this Falcons defense, especially with Raheem Morris at the helm. I feel like the Falcons are a team that should have a top 12 offense and defense now. Maybe not as confident in the defense, but they should not be anywhere close to where they were last year. So a lot to look forward to if you're the Falcons. Let's break down what happened last year, why they were so terrible in some ways. It was just the offense not showing up. I mean, the Falcons had, let's count it here. They had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games. They had 8 games where they scored under 20 points. They went, of course, 2-6 in those games. And the Falcons, an NFL team, did not break the 30-point barrier once all last season. That is embarrassing. That's an absolute joke. And to have an offensive-minded head coach, it is just an extreme failure on his end. So the Falcons, obviously, they were terrible last year. I mean, no way around it. One of the worst offenses a defense that was not too bad at all, but as the season went on, the last two games they gave up 85 points. So that definitely did not help things. But let's get into what I think the new look Falcons can do next year. Starting off week one at home against the Steelers and Arthur Smith, now former offensive coordinator, or head coach, I should say, current offensive coordinator of the Steelers. I think the Falcons get it done week one. I think their new additions are going to play a big role. I think the Falcons playing at home, the atmosphere definitely is going to play a factor here. The Steelers' first game with Russell Wilson, obviously it's Kirk Cousins' first game too, but I think the nerves might impact the Steelers a little bit more going on the road. I got the Falcons taking this one close, 24-20, both solid defenses here. I don't think we're going to see a high scoring game, but I do have the Falcons starting the season off 1-0, which is important because then it gets pretty fucking hard. You got on the road at the Eagles. It's a tough stretch, man. It's a tough stretch. I wouldn't, for clarification, I wouldn't pick any team in the league to go 2-0 in this first game stretch. So just to be fair there, but Falcons at the Eagles, it's just too tough of a place to play. Week two, too early. Eagles, great offense, great defense. I got them closely edging it out against the Falcons. Pause. And then Falcons come back home to host the Chiefs. I think they get the job done there. Keep in mind the Chiefs at this point probably will not have Hollywood Brown. I think the Chiefs are going to be a little slow out the gate. And then I think the Falcons rattle off 3 straight division games at home against the Saints, at home against the Buccaneers. I think that'll be the difference maker in both those games being at home. And then you go on the road for the easiest game of your schedule so far against the Panthers. I think they get the job done there. And now you have the Falcons starting the season off 5-1. What a start for them. You have multiple games scoring over 30 points, and it just looks like a whole new team, pretty much. Moving on now. At home against the Seahawks, pretty much it's just a thing where it's like, do I think they beat the Steelers, the Chiefs, and the Seahawks? No, I'm not too sure about that. I think at home, the Seahawks upset the Falcons there. And then you have the Buccaneers on the road. This was a close series last year. The Buccaneers are also a pretty good team. I don't think you sweep the Buccaneers in divisional play. It's just, it's a little far-fetched in my opinion. Moving on, though, I do think they come back home and get the win against the Cowboys. I don't think the Cowboys are very good. I think their defense is going to take a step backwards. And then on the road against the Saints, it's just one of those things. NFC South rivalries, especially Falcons, Saints, Falcons, Bucks. It doesn't matter how good either team is. Now, albeit the Buccaneers and Saints, neither of them are necessarily bad, but those are rivalries that are just so close every year. I do not see the Falcons sweeping either of those teams. However, I do think they rattle off 3 straight in a row after this. All of these games are extremely winnable. On the road against the Broncos, Broncos are one of the worst teams in the NFL. You should get the job done there. Justin Simmons' revenge tour, by the way. On the road against the Vikings, again, Vikings, possibly the worst team in the NFL. You have to win that game if you're the Falcons. And then the toughest of those 3 games, the Chargers, you get them at home. I think you get the job done there. I think their offense leaves a lot to be desired. I think the Falcons beat the Chargers at home. So you rattle off 3 straight after coming off that little difficult stretch in the middle of the season. And then on the road against the Raiders, Falcons got to travel a very long distance for that game. It's actually a road trip. You actually go from Minnesota to the Raiders. So listen, second half of a road back-to-back is always difficult to win. And the Raiders, not a bad team whatsoever, a really solid defense with some playmakers on offense. I just don't think the Falcons get the job done there. Second half of a back-to-back, very difficult. So I have them losing that game to the Raiders. Following that, I have them winning their last 3 games. All 3 of these games are extremely winnable. The Falcons draw a very good hand. The last 8 games of the season for the Falcons, I don't know if they play a single playoff team. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think the Saints are terrible. I don't think the Raiders, I think they could make the playoffs, but I think it's very possible that the Falcons' last 2 months of the season, they don't play a single playoff team, which is very good if you're a Falcons fan. The problem is they play, 5 of these 8 on the road, but I think they win their last 3 fairly easily. So they go 6-1 in their last 7. And I think the Falcons enter the playoffs as a 12-5 team. Now, I have 3 teams so far in the NFC at 12-5. I don't know who would win the tiebreaker. I have the Eagles at 12-5, and they beat the Falcons. I also have the Lions at 12-5, but I'm not sure. So I have the Eagles as the 1 seed still. And then Lions, Falcons doesn't matter. I think the Falcons certainly win their division. But in the wild card round, I think they lose to the Packers. They would host the Packers. This would be a home playoff game for the Falcons. And I couldn't even tell you why, but I just think the Packers, keep in mind, they get Josh Jacobs to really boost that offense. And don't get me wrong, Aaron Jones was good, but I think Josh Jacobs will be just a little bit better for the Packers. The improvement of their entire receiver core and Jordan Love. The defense, I think, also has room for improvement if you're the Packers. I might make a Packers video. I'm not sure, but I think the Packers are just they're so close. It's such a close game. I could absolutely, positively see the Falcons winning this game, but I don't know what it is. I think the Packers would get it done on the road in Atlanta. I got the Packers beating the Falcons 20-27. Now, while that may not be the season some Falcons fans were hoping for, I'm sure most people would be very, very happy in Kirk Cousins and Raheem Morris year one. 12-5, win the NFC South, dominate your division pretty much. A couple great wins against the Chiefs. You beat the Steelers. I'm sure they'd love to beat the Cowboys at home. So this was still this would be hypothetically a very, very good year for the Falcons. Falcons fans would feel like they're back in contention. They would be very excited going into next offseason. And yeah, man, this is how it would look. Finally, some major improvement in Atlanta, and they would not be so fucking terrible to watch every Sunday like I've been doing the last couple years. So, yeah, man, that's going to be it for this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I will be back very, very shortly with the next video. Peace.